Hi there, everyone. This is Laura Bennett with Sometimes Dancing. This is my third vlog entry, and as was the case with the first two and will be the case for the foreseeable future, I'm doing one take and one take only. So if it's a little rough around the edges, I apologize, but part of this vlogging adventure is about me getting better at it simply by doing it over and over again. And that is my dryer in the background. Cool. Okay, so today I want to keep talking about this really amazing book, which was the same thing that the first two vlog entries were about, but now I want to talk about chapter 2, which is that mentally strong people or parents don't parent out of guilt. And this chapter really hit home for me in a lot of big ways. And what I find interesting about it too is that it seems to me that if you are parenting out of guilt, then you're probably also doing a lot of these other parenting no-nos that have their own chapters, such as helping your kids avoid responsibility or take shortcuts so they can avoid discomfort, or shielding your kids from pain, or making them the center of your universe, or giving them too much power over you. I think that all of those things kind of tie together with parenting out of guilt. And one thing that I think is really crucial to consider if you're asking yourself, do I parent out of guilt, is to look at your own experiences growing up and how you were parented. Why I think this is important is because if you, I'll just make an example. So let's say that in your experiences growing up, you didn't receive enough empathy or enough validation, okay? If you are in denial about this, if we assume that this is a fact, right, that it was not enough and that it scarred you in some way, if you're in denial about this and you refuse to look at it, refuse to think about it at all, then I would say the chances are high, if it's not like even a guarantee, right, that you're going to parent your kids the same way and not give them enough empathy or validation, because it's going to be this knee-jerk reaction. It's all that you know, right? Then if that's not the case, another option is that you have reflected just enough on your own childhood experiences to realize, oh, I didn't receive enough empathy and validation. This is horrible. I'm not going to do this to my kid. And if that's all you've done, then chances are that you're going to swing over to the other side, overcompensate, and become like a helicopter parent, right? So if on the one side you're like a relatively neglectful parent, just because you were also parented by someone who was relatively neglectful, right? Then the overcompensating stance is that you're going to give quote unquote too much empathy or validation, and you're going to be controlling everything, freak out if they skin their knee, and that becomes enabling behavior, right? That can stem into her ideas about inculcating a victim mentality in your kid, and also just parenting out of guilt, right? You'll probably have difficulty saying no to your kid or denying them anything, right? So those are the black and white stances that we might take, but the difficult part is if we try to strike a balance, if we try to hit the middle way, if we want to live in the gray somewhere where we take the good from both extreme approaches and blend them together for like the ultimate good, right? And that's really, really hard to do, and it can feel really uncomfortable if you lean towards either one of these extreme stances. So for me, my baby right now is almost 4 months old, and I realized, with the help of my husband and reading some great books like this, that I have a tendency toward being the helicopter parent, that I have a tendency to parent out of guilt and parent out of fear, and to want to help my kid avoid pain of all kinds, right? And how this manifested itself early on was that if my baby let out the tiniest little squawk, right? Tiniest little squawk. Like, we're not talking crying here. We're just talking basically making a noise, right? I'd be all over him. Be like, oh, baby, what do you need? Mama's here. Like, just like freaking out about it. And I realized that I was parenting out of guilt, and that I was overcompensating, giving him too much empathy, right? Because it alleviated my own sense of guilt, and that it was actually a really, really bad thing for him. And once I started trying to be more comfortable with a gray position of always still going to him and comforting him if he was truly in distress, of course, but recognizing that if he's just, like making some little sounds or something, like say in the middle of the night, like he's still asleep. He's just, kind of tossing and turning a little bit, but nothing's wrong and he's okay. And if I just leave him alone, he's going to continue sleeping, which is what he needs, right? Like that's important, because what was happening was I was actually waking my baby up in the middle of the night when he would let out the tiniest little noise, right? And that was for me, not for him. And when I saw it that way, I was able to slowly start changing my behavior, but it was really hard at first to get comfortable with that that changed approach, I guess. Like I had to deal with feeling like, oh no, am I a bad parent? Am I scarring my kid for life? Like, does he actually need my comfort in these moments and I'm withholding it? But as I stuck with it a little bit and I saw the positive fruits, then I realized, no, I'm doing the right thing here. Like now he can sleep because he's tired and I'm not disturbing him. But he demonstrates in other ways that he has a very secure attachment to me. So I'm like, okay, it's all good. So anyway, I guess I just encourage you to reflect on your own growing up experiences, to think about how you were parented, and then ask yourself, are you parenting in exactly the same way? Are you parenting in the exact opposite way? Or have you struck a balance between the extreme of how you were parented, if that's the case, and the opposite extreme? Then I guess just a few other things about parenting out of guilt in general, to see if any of these statements resonate with you, because she does a really great job of kind of giving you a little checklist of, oh, if you're answering, ooh, this is true of me, ooh, that's true of me, then you're parenting out of guilt. So some of the things that stood out to me were if you feel guilty over things you don't have any control over, if you tend to ruminate on your past mistakes, if you have difficulty telling your kid no in one way or another. What were some of the other ones that really stood out to me? I love this, even just the wording of it. Even though I can't specifically identify why, I'm convinced I'm somehow going to mess my kid up for life. So yeah, that one resonated with me too. If you just in general beat yourself up because you feel like you're not as good of a parent as you should be, or if you compare yourself a lot to other parents and feel like you come up short and you need to be doing a better job. If you give your kid extra things because you feel guilty. Oh, this one resonated with me a lot too. No matter how much time I spend with my child, I feel like it's never enough. I'm still working on that one for sure. There's a lot more to say about this chapter, but what I want to leave it off with is a completely different point from what I've already mentioned, namely that I think we have to consider the definition of guilt and the definition of shame, right? Because there's a really big difference between the two. And to me, we feel guilty, rightfully guilty, when we have truly done something wrong and we need to apologize for what we've done and in some way potentially make amends, right? If that's not what we're experiencing, and instead we're experiencing kind of this generalized, vague feeling of I'm a horrible person, that's no longer guilt, that's shame. And I think that that this concept of parenting out of guilt maybe could be better worded in some instances as parenting out of shame, because if you have something in like you've made some parenting mistake at an isolated point in time, right, and it's not even something that you've done since, it just happened once a long time ago or whatever, if that's still weighing on you, then you probably don't feel guilt about that. You probably feel shame, like you're just a bad parent and how will you ever make this up to your child, kind of a thing. And that's also really relevant to me because our son had a really traumatic birth and had to be hospitalized for a week. And long story short, the treatments that he had to undergo and just the entire experience was the exact antithesis of everything that we were expecting or hoping for, everything that we wanted to give him from the very first moment that he was, outside the womb. And I've dealt with not just guilt over that because a lot of those circumstances were truly out of my control, but dealing with a lot of shame that I'm not a good parent because my kid had to experience these things. And so I know that I have this double whammy of because of how I was parented, a tendency to want to overcompensate and be too nurturing, if you will, just from the get-go. And then because of my son's very first week of life being chaotic and nightmarish, and how horrible I can still feel about that, both of those things together, I know that I have to majorly be on the lookout, that I'm not parenting out of guilt, and realizing that even though in the moment it might feel good to alleviate my sense of guilt or just run away from it, run in the opposite direction from it, and not feel the guilt in the first place by just giving my kid whatever he wants, that in the end that serves as that disserves him. Like, it makes me feel better, but at his expense. And because I really love him, I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna work on this and try not to parent out of guilt. And if any of this resonates with you too, then I hope that you will join me in this difficult process of dealing with our own discomfort so that we can make better choices for the kids that we love. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next time.